Hi there, I'm Jim.
And I'm Claire.
Let's talk teaching. Welcome to Let's Talk Teaching, a podcast from the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology here at Illinois State University. I'm Jim G. Joining me again today, our director, Claire LaMonica. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Jim.
So we've done a lot on our Pokey Little podcast over the years, talking about getting ready to teach for a semester. But today we want to actually talk about how to end a semester.
Yeah.
And specifically about what? Make sure students get that final feedback.
Yeah, well, I think when people think about the end of the semester, they tend to think about that end of semester slog through lots of student work.
Right.
At end of semester papers, end of semester projects, all sorts of things like that. So, at least that's what I always thought about. I always,
right.
I always, in the classroom, I'm always like, oh, those portfolios are coming. Those portfolios are coming. With some sense of dread.
But of course, that's probably good because at least you're thinking about it ahead of time, right?
Well, yes. I mean, I've known all semester that those portfolios were coming.
Right.
And I've actually worked for that. So I've worked with that in mind. So I think one of the things to think about in terms of end of semester feedback is how much time is it really worth putting into those projects and papers and so on and portfolios.
Right.
In all actuality, I probably didn't spend any more time assessing a final portfolio than I had spent on any one paper or one piece of that portfolio.
Okay.
So I was kind of looking at work throughout the semester. And then at the end, I was looking at, sort of the portfolio as a whole. There was a new piece to it, an analysis piece. And that's where I sort of focused my attention. But I didn't, I had a rubric or some kind of grading instrument. It sort of changed over the years from year to year. And I made notes on that, but I did not spend a lot of time writing voluminous comments to the students at that point in the semester. For one thing, experience taught me that 97% of the students were never going to come pick up those portfolios. They were just going to live on a shelf in my office. And this is really the old days. This is like when you actually got paper portfolios and they lived on a shelf rather than just digital portfolios that lived in ReggieNet or wherever. They were going to sit on my shelf until the time came when I was allowed to get rid of them.
Sure.
So, rather than spending a lot of time writing comments that nobody was ever going to read, I quickly filled out the grading tool, whatever assessment instrument I was using, and assigned the work a grade, put the grade in the grade book, shipped it off to the registrar's office, whatever, and put that portfolio with the grading instrument on my shelf. That way, if a student got in touch with me the next semester and said, hey, I'd like to come up pick up my portfolio, I could say, great, let's make an appointment. And then before that student came, I would go back, pull that portfolio off the shelf, and add some helpful comments, some comments that might help the student grow as a writer. But, I had been responding to that student as a writer all semester long.
Well, I think, and that's the key, isn't it? Right.
Yeah. I think that's really what we want to do. We want to front load that work or at least sort of spread it out over the semester so it's not this overwhelming thing at the end.
Right. So that goes back to something that we actually were talking about before we started recording today, which is kind of really focusing in on what is the purpose of that feedback at the end of the semester? What are you actually trying to accomplish for the students' benefit? And I'll add, as opposed to feeling guilty that you didn't give them enough feedback during the semester, and so you feel like you need to have that sense of closure or something like that.
Yeah. I just think, somehow we kind of get it in our brain that we're not doing our job if we're not like writing all kinds of comments on our student work. And then, as I said, if they never see it again, that's purposeless. That's wasted time. That's time out of our lives that we can never get back.
Right.
we can certainly, if there are students who are interested in that and feel like that's going to help them grow in some way or move forward in some way, or if we're going to give it back to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, some people, use part of their final exam time to hand back a final project,
Right.
or whatever. So if you're giving it back to the students, you want to give them some feedback about
Mm-hmm.
what Ken Bain would call the nature and quality of their progress, right? You kind of want to talk about what they've done and the growth that you've seen, whatever. But and sometimes if students are building a skill, so like their lab reports or lesson plans or something like that they're going to need in their next class, and you want to keep giving feedback on that. But if they're not going to get them back, they're never going to come collect them. Don't knock yourself out.
And I have to wonder how often that happens anymore, because I know things have changed in my own teaching so much since I taught a class where there was a physical final portfolio, and I'm sure I have them in a file cabinet someplace at home.
I hope not.
I think I probably do, to be honest. But all of my end of semester assessments now are done electronically,
right?
And so I do have the opportunity to give students that final bit of feedback. So what advice would you give me, or to give other instructors in that situation, about what should that final advice look like?
I think
that final feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, you may want to spend some time kind of explaining the grade, such as it is, but also I think sort of giving students a chance to look forward. This is what you need to do to continue to grow in this area. And of course, that's particularly true in major classes, where they're going to be moving on in the program.
Right.
And you may want to note deficiencies, things that you don't seem to have learned yet that you really are going to need to know, as you progress through the program or whatever. But also things that they're doing well, and sort of how you see their path forward in a positive light.
And that doesn't take a huge amount of text. You don't have to write them a wall of text in order to do that. It's just highlighting a couple things very quickly. It's not to say it doesn't take effort, but it does take. It does take effort, but it's not egregious.
Well, the effort that it takes is attending to that specific student.
Right. Yeah.
So this, this is obviously easier to do in smaller classes and larger classes, but you're probably also in larger classes, you're probably not collecting that sort of
huge summary of
the project, big end of semester project.
Right.
You're probably looking more at a cumulative exam or something along those lines, because if you've got 150 students, you probably aren't going to collect 150 projects on the last day of class or on their exam day.
Sure. And of course, for some students, and if the expectation is set up this way, then what they get as a grade on that final exam is supposed to be anyway an indication of where they're kind of at in their learning. We hope so. We've done episodes in the past, and we can actually link to them in the show notes for this episode with our colleague Julianne McFan talking about the disconnect that sometimes happens between grades and learning.
What does a grade mean? And
being a certification stuff. So I think in that regard, one of the important things, if possible, is to give students access to see what questions did they miss on that exam. At least to get a little more learning out of it. That becomes more problematic and is probably a little bit beyond the scope of today's episode, because then you're dealing with test security and test banks and all that stuff. So I do remember when I used to give a final exam in a class, I used to offer to students, if you're curious as to what you missed, come in and see me over the summer. Absolutely. Or come in and see me in the fall.
In the fall when you get back.
When you get back, and I'll be happy to show them to you. Because, of course, we also have to remember that, at least on our campus here at Illinois State, we're required to keep all of the materials involving students and students' grades for at least a year. So, which I think
their records retention policies.
There's a record, all of that stuff.
Yeah. So you have to kind of go with those.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's important to have that.
But I think the key thing to remember is giving feedback at the point when it's actually helpful to students.
Right.
And so that may mean giving more substantive feedback earlier in the course of the project, over the course of the project. And you can do that in a lot of ways. You know, you can collect drafts of the project if you want, but you can also have informal meetings with students. You can have meetings with groups of students. You know, we just posted something on Facebook the other day about giving audio feedback
or video feedback. Yeah.
That might have even been video feedback. So, you know, there's things you can do.
Well, and actually a shameless plug. I don't think I even have a title for it yet, and I have to get this done. I think I'm doing a workshop along those lines this summer, probably late in the summer, about communicating with students. And I may be partnering with one of our other colleagues here at CTLT, but because most people don't know, and we've talked about it on our podcast here, that you can record audio feedback in ReggieNet. There are all sorts of different ways through Office 365 and now with the new Adobe products that faculty have access to on campus. So there's a lot of different ways and a lot of free things that are out there too.
And you know, it's a process that's been going on for a long time. I know, you know, gosh, back in the day, we're giving feedback on cassette tapes.
Or, really? Yeah, sure.
I mean, or little, you know, or sending MP, whatever those
MP3s?
would be. Yeah.
Like people are listening to right now.
Like people, you know, sort of moving. This is what happens when you're around for a really long time. You see the sort of the evolution of that kind of feedback, but it's just getting easier and easier. And I think, you know, I think that's something that students can benefit from.
Well, and students don't have to go find a cassette player, or they don't have to go home to their VCR. They have all that stuff in their pocket, the ability to play this feedback. So I think that's also something to keep in mind too. So one final question for you. Looking back on your career as a learner, and no restrictions on age or degree being earned or whatever, was there a particular time when you felt like you got good end of semester feedback? Was there a particular time when you felt, or even not at the end of the semester, but that there was some sort of follow up with a past instructor that really helped stick the landing, as it were?
Well, I had a great dissertation director. I mean, I think that was, and the thing about her was that her feedback was always immediate. It was disconcertingly immediate. It was like, you know, I would turn in a chapter and I would think,
I had the same thing with my master's thesis.
I'm going to breathe a little bit here. And the dang thing would be back in my mailbox the next day. You know? And I'm like, what are you doing?
For my master's thesis, which of course is certainly not as probably as hefty a job of writing, but still as your dissertation, but still Dr. Zompetti here on campus, Joe Zompetti would turn stuff around within an hour, and I'd be emailing him stuff at like 3 a.m, hopefully to getting like some sleep or something before the feedback came back, and he'd be turning it around
that's
overnight.
Just scary.
Yeah,
Joe, get some sleep.
Yeah, really.
Note to Dr. Zompetti.
Yeah, no kidding. So anyway, but so you got really good feedback then from your.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I've had good feedback from lots of instructors over the years, and you know, even in the courses that led up to my dissertation, because you know, and the dissertation is something that kind of, you don't just get an idea. I mean, you get all these different ideas in these different classes you take, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh look, you know, here's something I'm really interested in. So. You know, just the feedback that I got from a lot of instructors on the way to that idea. You know, when I was as an undergraduate, I often didn't get feedback on end of semester projects.
Yeah, neither did I.
And I, you know, some of them, you know, some instructors would have you like leave them an envelope.
Right.
You know, self-addressed envelope that they would send things back in, send your final paper back in. And I think when I took the trouble to do that, I would take the trouble to do that when I was really interested in a class and I was really proud of my final project or paper. And I really wanted to know what the instructor had to say about it. I don't think I ever did that because I was really worried about a final paper.
Right.
I probably just didn't want to know in those situations. Right. But that feedback over the years was helpful. But most of the good feedback that I got came in the process of developing the project.
Right.
And that was just, you know, short note. That was notes on drafts, or it was conversations with the instructor in their office or during class, whatever.
Well, and so like we said, in this day and age, it is a lot easier to get feedback to students at the end of the semester or after the semester is over. They have access to ReggieNet at least for a few weeks after the end of the semester. So putting some feedback up there for them, there's a greater chance they're going to get to it.
I would venture, this is a broad generalization.
Yeah.
I would venture to guess that they look for feedback more if they're surprised by the grade. If if the grade they get doesn't match their expectations, and then they probably are looking for an explanation. Hey, how come
I got this or
grade?
Or how did I get? Or sometimes it could be a positive surprise too.
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness,
wow.
I actually got I always have an end of semester communication with my students. So we always meet for the final exam period, even though I don't actually give an exam. We have final projects that are being turned in, and we talk about them and present them during that time. But I always send them a final email with, okay, all your grades are in. I have sent them to the registrar's office, or I will send them on Tuesday morning or whatever. Part of that is that I give them a chance to say, hey, if you think I missed something.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Speak now or forever hold your peace. But then again, I also put in, and I try to encourage them to go to the assignment tool in ReggieNet or wherever their final projects are, and to look over that feedback.
Look at that.
Yeah. So sending them a reminder may or may not help. What I need to do, which I've never done before, and I just had a thought.
A light bulb just went off.
I know
it's right over Jim's head.
If only we were
shining there.
If only we were videotaping. Actually, no, I'd have to add like special effects to that. No, is to go back, because you can look at the statistics on when students access stuff in ReggieNet.
Oh, yeah.
I might actually go back and look at past semesters and see if I can see
if they do that.
If they actually went in and looked at it.
If they're sort of prompted
If I can get that granular on old courses and stuff
Yeah.
like that, I might have to do that. All right.
Well, anyway, I think the bottom line is don't kill yourself doing this.
Right.
But, give good feedback. Do it in a manageable way.
Right.
And get on to your summer work.
Exactly. All right, Claire. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Let's Talk Teaching. Find out more about our podcast. Go to our website, ctlt.illinoisstate.edu. For Dr. Claire LaMonica and for all my colleagues here at the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology, until we talk again, happy teaching.